Medieval jobs were pure nightmare fuel. Here's the worst. Hey guys, tonight we plunge into the muck and misery of medieval Europe, where jobs aren't just tough, they're the stuff of nightmares, reeking of death, filth, and danger. Picture yourself in a muddy village, the air thick with smoke and the stench of unwashed bodies. Your hands already blistered from work you'd rather not name. You're about to discover why you probably won't survive a day in these gruesome gigs. Trust me, your desk job's looking pretty sweet now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and the local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a foggy cemetery at midnight. The year's roughly 1350, and your job as a gravedigger is about to make your skin crawl. Your shovel bites into the damp earth, each scoop heavy with clay and the weight of the Black Death's latest victims. The air smells of rot and wet grass, and your lantern's flicker barely cuts the dark. Piles of bodies, wrapped in tattered shrouds, wait nearby too many for proper burial. You're sweating despite the chill, and every creak of a branch makes you jump. Could you keep digging with ghosts or worse watching? Gravedigging was a grim necessity in medieval Europe, especially during the Black Death, which killed up to half the population between 1347 and 1351. Historical records, like those from London's plague pits, show gravediggers worked non-stop, often at night to avoid panicked crowds. You toss another shovelful, the dirt clumping like bad porridge, and notice a rat scurrying over a shroud. The plague's still raging, and you're knee-deep in its fallout. With no mask or gloves, just a rag you hope keeps the miasma out. Your back aches, but stopping means no pay, and no pay means no bread. Here's a quirky tidbit: some gravediggers moonlighted as corpse bearers, charging extra to cart bodies from homes, though they often pilfered the dead's shoes first. You spot a worn boot poking from a shroud and smirk, but it's worth more than your wages. Historians still argue whether gravediggers were unsung heroes or just desperate opportunists. You're leaning toward opportunists as you dodge a falling clod, your lantern swaying. This cemetery's a death trap, and you're its reluctant guest. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even creepier. For now, you're digging, the pile of bodies growing as a cart rattles up with more. You recall nothing like that Wild West gunfight's quick violence. This is slower, heavier, with death stink as your constant shadow. A woman's wail echoes from the village, another family broken, and you wonder if you're burying her kin. Bet you'd trade this for a cozy bed, but there's no rest here. The shovel's your master, and it doesn't care about your fears. You notice a crude cross marking an older grave. Its wood splintered, maybe a priest, maybe a pauper. The church paid gravediggers a pittance, but you're expected to pray for each soul, though you're too tired to mumble. You smirk kinda like a Zoom meeting with no mute button. But for eternity, the fog thickens, and you're starting to see why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the bodies, it's the dread, the endlessness, the feeling you're half dead yourself. Your hands blister, but you keep digging, the pile looming. Don't skip the next part, because it gets grimmer. You pause, wiping sweat, and spot a figure in the fog, another digger, or something else. Some swore cemeteries were haunted, and you're not laughing now. The Black Death made gravediggers essential, but also pariahs, shunned for their closeness to death. You wonder if you'd last a week. Spoiler, probably not. The lantern gutters, and you shovel faster. The dirt's chill seeping into your bones. Medieval jobs like this weren't work, they were survival, and you're barely hanging on. The cemetery's a hungry beast, and you're its next meal. You've left the cemetery's grim shadows behind, your boots now squelching through a swampy marsh on the edge of a medieval village. The air damp and buzzing with flies. It's dawn, around 1350, and the stench of stagnant water and rotting reeds clogs your nose. You're a leech collector, wading knee-deep in muck to lure blood-sucking worms with your own skin for meager pay. Your legs are bare, already prickling with bites, and you clutch a clay jar to store your wriggling haul. You spot a slimy leech clinging to your calf, and your stomach lurches. Could you keep waiting with these vampires feasting on you? Leech collecting was a vital, if revolting, job in medieval Europe, supplying medicinal leeches for bloodletting, a common treatment for everything from fevers to bad moods. Historical records, like those from 14th century medical texts, show leech collectors, often poor women, risked infection and exhaustion in filthy waters. You grit your teeth, peeling the leech off with a squelch and dropping it into the jar, where it writhes with its kin. The marsh is a maze of reeds and hidden sinkholes. One wrong step, and you're stuck, or worse, sick. Your skin's a patchwork of red welts, and you're praying for enough leeches to afford a loaf. Here's a quirky tidbit: some collectors used old horses as bait, letting leeches latch on before harvesting. But you're too poor for that trick. You spot a frog eyeing you from a reed, and smirk bet it's laughing at your lousy career choice. Historians still argue whether leech collecting was a desperate hustle or a skilled trade for the era's medicine. You're leaning toward desperate as you swat a mosquito, its bite just icing on this miserable cake. This swamp's a leech's paradise, but your personal hell. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even grosser. For now, you're wading deeper, the muck sucking at your thighs, each step a gamble. You recall that gravedigger's eerie nights. This is wetter, livelier, but no less grim. With every bite, a tiny theft of your strength. The jar's half full, but you need more to barter with the apothecary, who's as stingy as he is smarmy. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West snakebite's quick danger. At least it wasn't your job to invite the fangs. You notice a woman nearby, her skirts hitched as she collects her own leeches, her hands deft despite the slime. Women like her dominated this trade, their low status forcing them into jobs men dodged. You smirk, kinda like signing up for the worst gig on a medieval Craigslist. The water's cold, numbing your toes, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the leeches, it's the slow drain of your body, the constant itch, the fear of fever from a bad bite. Your jar clinks, but it's not enough yet. Don't miss the next part, because it gets nastier. You yank another leech off, its grip stubborn, leaving a trickle of blood. Some collectors fainted from blood loss or caught marsh fevers, their bodies betraying them before payday. You wonder if you'd make it through a season spoiler. Probably not. You spot a ripple, maybe a snake, maybe just reeds, but your heart's racing. You recall that Roman Poena Cully's grim sack. This is less dramatic, but just as punishing. A slow bleed in slow motion. The air's thick with damp and dread, and you're itching in places you didn't know existed. As you slog on, you notice a sunken log, half rotted, where leeches cluster like a living carpet. You force yourself closer, your jar heavier but your legs shakier. The woman glances over, her face grim but focused. She's your mirror, surviving one bite at a time. Medieval jobs like this weren't just work. They were wars against nature and need, fought with bare hands and grim resolve. You take a shaky breath, the swamp stench choking you, and brace for what's next. This marsh is a bloodsucker's buffet, and you're the main course. You've dragged yourself out of the leech-infested swamp, your legs still itching as you stumble into a cramped, reeking workshop on the edge of a medieval town, circa 1350. The air's heavy with a sour ammonia stench that burns your eyes, and your boots slip on a slick stone floor. You're a fuller now, tasked with stomping urine-soaked wool in a rancid vat to clean and soften it for cloth making. You step into the vat, the warm, pungent liquid sloshing over your ankles, and gag as you start treading. Could you stomach this job, knee-deep in someone's stale business? Fulling was a critical step in medieval textile production, transforming raw wool into usable fabric for tunics and cloaks. Historical records, like those from 14th century guild logs in Flanders, show fullers worked in vile conditions, using human urine to break down grease in wool. You stomp rhythmically, the wool squelching underfoot, each step releasing a fresh wave of stink that clings to your skin. The vat's wooden sides are stained dark, and you're sweating despite the chill, your hands gripping the edge for balance. This isn't just gross, it's a full-body assault, and quitting means starvation. Here's a quirky tidbit: some fullers collected urine from taverns, where drunks were happy to donate for a free ale. You spot a bucket in the corner, brimming with yellow liquid, and smirk bet it's the worst bar tab ever. Historians still argue whether fulling was a skilled craft or just a filthy necessity for the cloth trade. You're leaning toward filthy as a fly buzzes past, drawn to the vat's aroma. This workshop's a cesspool, and you're the one stirring it. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even worse. For now, you're treading, the urine splashing your shins, your stomach churning like a bad stew. You recall that leech collector's slimy ordeal. This is drier, but no less revolting. Trading bites for a stench that'll haunt your dreams. The workshop's dim, lit by a single tallow candle, its smoky flicker making the vat look like a witch's cauldron. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West saloon brawl. At least you could punch back. You notice a woman across the room, pounding wool with a wooden mallet, her face set in grim focus. Women often worked as fullers, their labor cheaper than men's, though the stench spared no one. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a spa day, but with medieval plumbing, the wool's getting softer, but your legs are cramping, and the fumes are dizzying. You're starting to get why fulling was nightmare fuel. It's not just the smell, it's the endless slog, the burning eyes, the knowledge you're literally wading in waste. Don't miss the next part, because it gets grimier. You pause to wipe sweat, your hands slick with who knows what, and spot a rat nibbling a scrap of wool. Some fullers developed rashes or lung problems from the fumes, their bodies paying for every yard of cloth. You wonder if you last a month. Spoiler. Probably not. The woman glances over, nodding like your comrades in this stink war. You recall that Roman fuller's vat of urine. This is its medieval cousin, just as foul but with worse hours. The air's thick with ammonia and despair, and you're praying for fresh air. As you keep stomping, you notice a crack in the vat, leaking a trickle of yellow onto the floor. Great. Now you're mopping, too. You take a shaky breath, the stench searing your throat. Medieval jobs like fulling weren't just work, they were tests, breaking your body and spirit for a penny or two. You glance at the woman, her mallet still thumping, and brace for what's next. This workshop's a prison of piss, and you're serving a life sentence with every step. You've staggered out of the fuller's reeking workshop, the ammonia stench still clinging to your clothes as you trudge through a medieval town's narrow, muddy alleys. Circa 1350. It's twilight, and the air's thick with smoke and a foul odor that makes your eyes water. You're a gong farmer now, tasked with scooping human waste from overflowing cesspits in the dead of night. Your shovel scrapes against a stone-lined pit, the slop squelching as you lift a load into a creaking cart. You gag. Your lantern's dim glow barely cutting the dark. Could you stomach this filth for a single night's pay? Gong farming was a vital, if reviled, job in medieval Europe, keeping towns from drowning in their own waste. Historical records, like those from 14th century London's sanitation laws, show gong farmers worked at night to avoid public scorn, hauling excrement to fields or rivers. You scoop another load. The pit's contents a stew of rot that splashes your boots. The alley's silent, save for the cart's groan and your own ragged breaths. You're alone, but the stench is company enough, wrapping you like a damp cloak. One slip, and you're in the pit, literally. Here's a quirky tidbit: some gong farmers were paid in gong pennies, coins so foul they were spent only at desperate taverns. You pat your empty pocket and smirk, bet those coins smell better than you do now. Historians still argue whether gong farmers were unsung sanitation heroes, or just the lowest rung of society's ladder. You're leaning toward lowest as a rat scurries past, unfazed by the stink. This alley's a sewer, and you're its reluctant janitor. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even nastier. For now, you're shoveling. The pit's depth, a cruel surprise, deeper than you'd hoped, stickier than you'd feared. You recall that fuller's urine vat's sour burn. This is earthier, heavier, like digging through despair itself. The cart's half full, but the pit's still brimming, and you've got 3 more before dawn. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West bandit ambush. At least you could run from bullets. You notice a woman's silhouette at the alley's end. Dumping a chamber pot into another pit, she's gone before you can nod. Women sometimes worked as gong farmers. Their pay even worse than men's. Scraping by in a job no one wanted. You smirk, kind of like signing up for the medieval version of a toxic cleanup crew. The shovel's weight is numbing your arms, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the filth, it's the shame, the endless pits, the fear of disease lurking in every scope. Don't miss the next part, because it gets grimmer. You heave another load, a splash hitting your sleeve, and you swallow a curse. Some gong farmers caught fevers, or worse from the waste. Their lives as disposable as the muck they hauled. You wonder if you'd survive a season spoiler. Probably not. You spot a faint glow from a tavern. Its warmth, a cruel tease. You recall that Roman gong farmer's similar stench. This is its twin, just with colder nights and meaner rats. The air's thick with rot and exhaustion, and you're praying for dawn. As you keep digging, you notice a broken jug bobbing in the pit, someone's trash. Your treasure, if you're lucky enough to pawn it. You take a shaky breath, the stench searing your lungs. Medieval jobs like gong farming weren't just work. They were punishments, grinding you down for a crust of bread. You glance at the cart, its load swaying like a grim harvest, and brace for what's next. This alley's a cesspit of despair, and you're neck deep in its misery. You've hauled your reeking cart out of the town's fetid alleys, the gong farmer's stench still clinging as you shuffle into a dark, rat-infested street circa 1350. Where the air hums with a skitter of tiny claws. Your boots crunch on straw strewn over mud, and you clutch a crude trap and a sack. Your new job as a rat catcher plunging you into a vermin-charged nightmare. You spot a pair of beady eyes glinting from a pile of refuse, and your skin crawls as you set the trap. Could you face these disease-carrying pests night after night? Rat catching was a grim necessity in medieval Europe, where rodents spread plague and devoured precious grain. Historical records, like those from 14th century Paris, show rat catchers were hired by towns to curb infestations, often working alone in filthy corners. You bait the trap with a scrap of moldy bread, your hands shaking as you hear a squeak nearby. The street's a maze of shadows, with piles of garbage and open sewers as rat playgrounds. One bite could mean fever, and you're armed with nothing but a stick and a grim resolve. You're starting to feel like you're hunting death itself. Here's a quirky tidbit: some rat catchers kept tame rats to lure others, parading them like grim pets, though good luck keeping them friendly. You spot a rat nibbling your bait, its whiskers twitching, and smirk, bet it's not signing up for cuddles. Historians still argue whether rat catchers were vital pest control, or just scapegoats blamed for plague spread. You're leaning towards scapegoats as you hear a hiss, maybe a cat, maybe another rat. This street's a battlefield, and you're outgunned. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even creepier. For now, you're crouching, the trap spring creaking as you wait. You recall that gong farmer's putrid pits. This is less smelly but twitchier, with every shadow a potential bite. The rat darts, and the trap snaps. Catching it by the tail, it squeals, thrashing, and you flinch, fumbling to bag it. Towns paid per rat, a penny for a dozen, but you need hundreds to eat. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West snake bites quick sting. At least snakes don't swarm. You notice a woman slipping past. Her cloak patched, she's another catcher. Her sack wriggling with her night's haul. Women often took this job, their nimble hands prized, though the pay was as lousy as the rats were bold. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval pest control gig, but with zero benefits. The trapped rat's still fighting, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the vermin, it's the dark, the bites, the fear you're one scratch from the plague's grip. Don't miss the next part, because it gets nastier. You bag the rat, it squeals muffled, but another scurries over your boot, and you jump, heart pounding. Some catchers died from infections or went mad from the endless hunt, their lives chewed up like the grain they protected. You wonder if you'd last a month, spoiler. Probably not. You spot a flickering torch, maybe a watchman, maybe trouble. You recall that Roman rat-infested alleys. This is their medieval kin, just with more fleas. The air's thick with damp and dread, and you're praying your trap holds. As you reset the bait, you notice a gnawed bone in the refuse, human or animal. You don't want to know. You take a shaky breath. The streets chill, seeping into your bones. Medieval jobs like rat catching weren't just work. They were wars against a scurrying enemy, fought in the dark with no victory. You glance at the woman, her sack still twitching, and brace for what's next. This alley's a rat's kingdom, and you're just a trespasser, hoping to survive the night. You've escaped the rat-infested alleys, their squeak still echoing as you step into a medieval tannery, circa 1350, where the air hits like a punch, rancid, sour, and thick with the stench of rotting flesh and oak bark. Your boots stick to a floor slick with grease, and you're a tanner now, scraping animal hides in a foul workshop to turn them into leather. You grip a curved knife, slicing at a cowhide stretched on a frame, its slimy surface glistening under a flickering torch. You gag as a chunk of fat splatters your arm. Could you endure this reeking grind day after day? Tanning was essential in medieval Europe, producing leather for shoes, armor, and saddles. But it was a gruesome, toxic trade. Historical records, like those from 14th century guild regulations in London, describe tanners soaking hides in urine and dung to soften them, then scraping off flesh in stifling workshops. You hack at the hide, your hands raw from the knife's wooden handle, the stench burrowing into your skin. The tannery's a maze of vats, each bubbling with foul liquids, urine, lime, or worse. One wrong step, and you're burned or sick, and the pay's barely enough for bread. Here's a quirky tidbit: some tanners use dog dung, collected from streets, to make finer leather. Calling it pure was their grim joke. You spot a pile of suspicious brown lumps in a corner and smirk, bet it's not chocolate. Historians still argue whether tanning was a skilled craft or just a filthy job for the desperate. You're leaning toward desperate as a fly lands on the hide, buzzing like it owns the place. This workshop's a cesspool, and you're drowning in it. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even nastier. For now, you're scraping, the hide's stubborn flesh clinging like it's fighting back. You recall that rat catcher's twitchy nights. This is slower, stickier, but no less vile. With every breath, a gamble against disease. The torch sputters, casting shadows that make the vats look alive. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West cowboy's dusty trail. At least fresh air was free. You notice a woman stirring a vat nearby, her arms muscled from years of this work, her face set against the fumes. Women tanners were rare but vital, often widows taking over family trades, their hands as scarred as any man's. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval hazmat team, but with worse PPE. The hide's starting to smooth, but your eyes sting from lime fumes, and you're starting to get why tanning's nightmare fuel. It's not just the stink, it's the burns, the sickness, the endless hides waiting like a grim to-do list. Don't miss the next part, because it gets grimmer. You slice too deep, nicking your finger, and wince open cuts. Here are a death wish, with infections lurking in every vat. Some tanners lost limbs to gangrene, or lungs to fumes. Their bodies as worn as the leather they made. You wonder if you'd survive a year. Spoiler, probably not. You spot a rat, yep. They're here too, nibbling a hide's edge. You recall that Roman fullers' urine vats. This is their toxic cousin, just as foul but deadlier. The air's thick with rot and despair, and you're praying for a breeze. As you keep scraping, you notice a cracked bucket leaking lime. Its burn eating the floor grate. Another hazard. You take a shaky breath, the stench searing your throat. Medieval jobs like tanning weren't just work. They were slow poison, trading your health for a scrap of leather. You glance at the woman, her stirring steady despite the chaos, and brace for what's next. This tannery's a butcher's shop for your senses, and you're barely holding on. You've stumbled out of the tannery's toxic haze, the stench of rotting hide still clinging as you step into a crowded medieval market square, circa 1350, where the air hums with shouts and the metallic tang of blood. Your boots crunch on straw scattered over cobblestones, and you're an executioner now, gripping a heavy axe as you face a condemned man kneeling before a wooden block. The crowd's a sea of jeers and morbid curiosity, their eyes boring into you as you steady your hands. Your stomach twists. Could you swing the blade with a town watching your every move? Executioners were both feared and essential in medieval Europe, carrying out public punishments for crimes from theft to treason. Historical records, like those from 14th century Nuremberg, show executioners performed hangings, beheadings, and worse, often for meager pay and social exile. You adjust your grip, the axe's weight pulling at your shoulders, and study the man, his face pale, lips muttering a prayer. The crowd chants for blood, some tossing rotten apples, and you feel the pressure like a noose. One shaky swing, and you're the one they'll mock, or worse, attack. Here's a quirky tidbit: some executioners sold lucky charms made from the condemned's hair, claiming they warded off evil, gruesome side hustle. You spot a woman in the crowd clutching a braided cord and smirk, bet it cost her a week's wages. Historians still argue whether executioners were skilled professionals or just outcasts doing society's dirty work. You're leaning toward outcasts as a kid pelts you with a pebble, his grin fearless. The square's a stage, and you're the villain, axe or not. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even bloodier. For now, you're steadying yourself, the man's eyes meeting yours, pleading, resigned, or defiant. You can't tell. You recall that Tanner's reeking vats. This is louder, sharper, but no less grim, trading stench for screams. The sheriff nods, signaling it's time, and your heart pounds. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West gallows mob justice? At least you'd share the blame. You notice a woman near the block, her face hidden by a hood, maybe his wife, maybe a mourner paid to wail. Women rarely swung the axe, but sometimes assisted, cleaning scaffolds or sewing shrouds, their hands as stained as yours. You smirk, kinda like being the stage crew for a medieval horror show. The crowd's roar spikes, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the killing, it's the weight of judgment, the isolation, the fear you'll botch the swing and prolong the agony. Don't miss the next part, because it gets darker. You raise the axe, its blade glinting, and the crowd hushes, waiting for the thud. Some executioners drank to steady their nerves. Others prayed, but mistakes dull blades. Bad aim meant torture, not mercy. You wonder if you'd hit true spoiler. Probably not. You spot a priest muttering blessings, his presence a thin shield against the mob's bloodlust. You recall that Roman executioner's grim duty. This is its public cousin, with cheers instead of silence. The air's thick with dust and dread, and you're praying for a clean cut. As you tense for the swing, you notice a raven perched on a nearby roof, its caw cutting through the noise. Bad omen, or just another critic. You take a shaky breath, the blood's tang sharp in your nose. Medieval jobs like executioner weren't just work, they were curses, marking you as death's servant for life. You glance at the man, his head bowed, and brace for what's next. This square's a theater of cruelty, and you're the star, whether you like it or not. You've left the executioner's bloody stage behind, the crowd's jeers fading as you slip into the cool, shadowed halls of a medieval castle, circa 1350, where the air smells of polished wood and faintly of fear. Your boots echo on stone floors, and you're a whipping boy now, tasked with taking beatings meant for a spoiled prince who's smirking nearby, his velvet tunic pristine while your rough shirt hides fresh bruises. You stand tense, a tutor brandishing a willow switch, ready to punish the prince's latest prank on you. Your jaw clenches. Could you endure pain for someone else's mistakes? Whipping boys were a real, bizarre role in medieval and early modern Europe, used to discipline royal children who couldn't be struck directly. Historical records, like those from 16th century England, describe boys raised alongside princes, absorbing physical punishment to teach lessons the noble couldn't feel. You flinch as the switch whistles, stinging your back, and the prince giggles, unrepentant for stealing a pie. The hall's grand, with tapestries of knights, but you're no hero, just a human pincushion. Each lash burns, and you're biting your lip to keep quiet, knowing tears will only amuse him. Here's a quirky tidbit: some whipping boys were given noble titles as a grim thank you, though no title soothed the welts. You notice a silver ring on your finger, a hollow reward, and smirk bet it's worth less than a good hiding spot. Historians still argue whether whipping boys were effective discipline or just cruel proxies for bad parenting. You're leaning toward cruel as you catch the tutor's cold stare, his switch poised for another strike. This castle's a gilded cage, and you're the one getting clipped. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even more unfair. For now, you're bracing, the switch's bite lingering as the prince whispers a taunt, something about your peasant blood. You recall that executioner's grim axe. This is less deadly, but no less humiliating. Trading blood for bruises. The tutor's lecture drones on, blaming you for the prince's laziness, and you wonder why you're here: loyalty, desperation, or just bad luck. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West vigilante mob. At least you'd have a fighting chance. You notice a woman in the corner, a servant mending a tapestry, her eyes flickering with pity as the switch lands again. Women rarely served as whipping boys, but some, like nursemaids, took lesser punishments for noble girls, their backs scarred for royal tantrums. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval HR complaint, but with no union. The prince's smirk widens, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the pain, it's the injustice, the powerlessness, the fact you're a punching bag for a brat's ego. Don't miss the next part, because it gets grimmer. You grit your teeth as another lash lands. You're back a map of welts. Some whipping boys grew close to their princes, even becoming advisors, but most were discarded once the royal grew up. Their scars worthless. You wonder if you'd stay loyal or bolt spoiler. Probably bolt. You spot a guard watching, his face blank, nobody's saving you. You recall that Roman whipping boy's public shame. This is quieter, but the sting's just as deep. The air's thick with wax and resentment, and you're praying for the lesson to end. As the tutor pauses, you notice a faded bruise on your arm. From yesterday's discipline, the prince's Latin was shaky, and you paid for it. You take a shaky breath, the wood's polish mocking your rough state. Medieval jobs like whipping boy weren't just work, they were sacrifices, trading your body for a noble's conscience. You glance at the prince, his smirk unshaken, and brace for what's next. This hall's a theater of cruelty, and you're the prop, caught in a script you didn't write. You've slipped out of the castle's cold halls, the sting of the whipping boy's switch still sharp as you step into a noisy medieval street, circa 1350, where the air smells of blood, herbs, and the faint tang of fear. Your boots crunch on straw-strewn cobbles, and you're a barber surgeon now, clutching a leather satchel of rusty tools as you approach a groaning man on a wooden table, his leg swollen and oozing. The crowd watches, some praying, others betting on his odds, and you steady your saw for a brutal amputation. No anesthesia, just grit. Your hands shake. Could you cut through bone with screams ringing in your ears? Barber surgeons were medieval Europe's go-to for medical care, performing everything from haircuts to amputations with crude tools and no germ theory. Historical records, like those from 14th century London's guild rolls, show they tackled broken bones, infections, and tooth extractions, often killing as many patients as they saved. You splash the man's leg with wine, your only disinfectant, and tie a leather strap around his thigh. His screams start before the saw touches flesh, and you grit your teeth, the bone's resistance jarring your arms. This isn't healing, it's butchery, and you're the reluctant blade. Here's a quirky tidbit: some barber surgeons used a wound man diagram, a cartoonish figure marked with injuries, as a cheat sheet for their hacks. You glance at your satchel, a tattered sketch peeking out, and smirk, but it's less helpful than a Google search. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons were skilled healers or just desperate hacks filling a medical void. You're leaning toward hacks as a kid, and the crowd mimics your sawing, giggling like it's a game. This street's a surgery theater, and you're botching the starring role. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even bloodier. For now, you're sawing. The man's cries drowning out the crowd's murmurs, blood pooling under the table. You recall that whipping boy's private pain. This is public, chaotic, with every cut a gamble against death. The saw grates, and you wince, praying you don't nick an artery. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West doctor's shaky remedies. At least they had whiskey for the patient. You notice a woman nearby, her apron stained, handing you a cloth to mop the blood. She's likely a midwife or healer, often working alongside barber surgeons, her remedies as dubious as yours. Women like Trotula of Salerno wrote medical texts, but most toiled in the shadows, unpaid. You smirk, kinda like being a medieval paramedic with no ambulance. The man's thrashing weakens, maybe from shock, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the gore, it's the guilt, the failure, the knowledge you're often the last face they see. Don't miss the next part, because it gets grimmer. You finish the cut, the leg thudding to the ground, and bind the stump with linen, hoping it holds. Some patients survived amputations, but infection unknown and unstoppable claimed most within days. You wonder if you keep cutting or flee spoiler. Probably flee. You spot a priest hovering, ready to bless or bury. You recall that Roman barber's crude tools. This is their brutal air, with screams instead of silence. The air's thick with blood and panic, and you're praying he pulls through. As you step back, you notice a fly land on the stump bad sign, but you're too tired to care. You take a shaky breath. The herb's tang faint against the blood's iron. Medieval jobs like barber-surgeon weren't just work. They were dances with death, balancing hope and horror on a rusty blade. You glance at the woman, her cloth now soaked, and brace for what's next. This street's a slaughterhouse of good intentions, and you're the one holding the saw. You've wiped the barber-surgeon's blood from your hands, the screams of the amputee fading as you step into a dimly lit village church, circa 1350, where the air is heavy with incense and the musty chill of stone. Your boots scuff on the uneven floor, and you're a sin eater now, tasked with absorbing the sins of the dead by eating a ritual meal over their corpse. A shrouded body lies on a table, a loaf of bread and a cup of ale placed on its chest, and you're expected to consume them while a grieving family watches. Your stomach churns. Could you swallow this cursed feast with eternity's weight on your shoulders? Sin eating was a peculiar medieval practice, mostly in rural Britain, where a hired person took on the deceased's sins to ensure their soul's peace. Historical records, like those from 17th century Wales, describe sin eaters as outcasts, paid a pittance to perform this eerie ritual. Though its roots likely stretch to the Middle Ages, you sit beside the corpse, the bread stale and the ale sour, and feel the family's eyes, half hopeful, half repulsed. The shroud's edge reveals a waxy hand, and you shudder, the incense doing little to mask death's faint tang. This isn't just eating, it's a pact with the unknown, and you're the reluctant middleman. Here's a quirky tidbit: some sin eaters used sin bread baked with ashes, believing it trapped evil spirits tasty. If you like your loaf haunted, you break the bread, crumbs falling on the shroud, and smirk, bet it's not winning any bake-off. Historians still argue whether sin eating was a sacred rite or just a superstitious scam for desperate times. You're leaning towards scam as a kid peeks from behind his mother, staring like you're a ghoul. This church is a stage for the macabre, and you're the grim star. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even creepier. For now, you're chewing the bread like sawdust, each bite a silent prayer. You're not damned. You recall that barber surgeon's bloody saw. This is quieter, colder, but no less unsettling. Trading gore for ghosts. The ale's bitter, and you force it down, the family chanting softly, blessing or curse. You can't tell. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West gambling den's rigged cards. At least you'd only lose money. You notice a woman in the family, her face lined with grief. Clutching a rosary, she's the widow, maybe paying you her last coins to save her husband's soul. Women sometimes served as sin eaters, their low status pushing them into roles men shunned, their prayers as heavy as yours. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval ghost-busting gig, but with no proton pack. The bread's gone, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the meal, it's the dread, the isolation, the fear you're swallowing more than crumbs. Don't miss the next part, because it gets eerier. You sip the last of the ale, your throat tight, and feel a chill, like the corpse is watching. Some sin eaters were shunned, believed to carry evil, their lives lonelier than the graves they served. You wonder if you keep eating or run. Spoiler. Probably run. You spot a candle flickering, its light dancing on the shroud. You recall that Roman sin ritual's mythic weight. This is its folk cousin. With faith instead of fanfare, the air's thick with incense and unease, and you're praying the ritual ends soon. As you stand, you notice a worn coin on the table you pay, barely enough for a meal. Ironic given what you just ate. You take a shaky breath, the church's chill seeping into your bones. Medieval jobs like sin eating weren't just work, they were burdens, tying you to the dead for a fleeting hope of salvation. You glance at the widow, her rosary still clicking, and brace for what's next. This church is a vault of fears, and you're locked in, carrying sins you didn't earn. You've stepped out of the church's eerie gloom, the sin eater's bitter bread still heavy in your stomach, as you wade into the muddy banks of a medieval river, circa 1350, where the air smells of damp earth and rotting fish. Your boots sink into the sludge, and you're a mudlark now, scavenging for treasures, coins, pins, anything in the filthy riverbed to scrape by. Your hands sift through the muck, cold and slimy, as you spot a glint that might be a penny or just broken glass. You shiver, the water lapping at your knees. Could you keep digging in this grime with hunger gnawing at your bones? Mudlarking was a desperate trade in medieval Europe, often done by the poorest, including children and women, who scoured riverbanks for anything sellable. Historical records, like those from 14th century London's Thames, show mudlarks found everything from lost jewelry to rusted nails. Bartering their haul for food, you pluck a bent spoon from the mud, its metal tarnished but worth a crust, and tuck it into your soggy sack. The river's a sewer, littered with waste and sharp hazards, glass, bones, or worse. One cut could mean infection, and you're starting to feel like you're panning for gold in a latrine. Here's a quirky tidbit: some mudlarks claimed they found mermaid bones, likely fish spines, and sold them as charms to gullible merchants. You spot a weirdly shaped bone in the mud and smirk, but it's not Poseidon's leftovers. Historians still argue whether mudlarking was a survival tactic or a grim reflection of medieval poverty. You're leaning toward poverty as you dodge a floating clump of who knows what, your fingers numb from the cold. This river's a junkyard, and you're its reluctant scavenger. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even messier. For now, you're sifting, the mud sucking at your hands. Each find a tiny victory against starvation. You recall that sin eater's creepy feast. This is less sacred, but no less grim. Trading souls for sludge. A barge passes, its oarsmen sneering at you, and you wonder if you're scavenging their trash. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West boomtown's gold fever. At least the dirt there was dry. You notice a woman nearby, her skirts hitched, pulling a rusted buckle from the muck, another mudlark, her face etched with the same hunger driving you. Women and kids dominated this trade, their small hands nimble, though the river spared no one its filth or dangers. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval dumpster dive, but with worse odds. The spoon's your only score so far, and you're starting to get why mudlarking's nightmare fuel. It's not just the grime, it's the cold, the cuts, the hope that keeps you digging through despair. Don't miss the next part, because it gets filthier. You reach deeper, your hand brushing something sharp, a broken jug, slicing your palm, and you wince, blood mixing with mud. Some mudlarks drowned in sudden tides or died from infected wounds, their lives as fleeting as their finds. You wonder if you keep scavenging or quit. Spoiler. Probably keep going. You're that hungry. You spot a kid upstream, no older than 10, hauling a sack twice his size. You recall that Roman mudlark's riverbed toil. This is its twin, with colder water and meaner stakes. The air's thick with damp and decay, and you're praying for one good find. As you rinse the cut, you notice a glint, a copper coin, worn but real, and you snatch it, heart racing. You take a shaky breath. The river's chill, biting your bones. Medieval jobs like mudlarking weren't just work, they were gambles, betting your health on scraps the river might spit out. You glance at the woman, her buckle clutched like a trophy, and brace for what's next. This river's a miser's hoard, and you're begging for its crumbs, one muddy handful at a time. You've dragged yourself from the river's slimy grip, the mudlark's meager coin cold in your pocket as you trudge through a medieval town's foggy streets, circa 1350, where the air smells of coal smoke and damp straw. It's barely dawn, and you're a knocker-up now, tasked with waking workers by tapping their windows with a long stick. Your only tool in a job that's as exhausting as it is odd. Your boots slip on icy cobbles, and you rap a shudder, hearing a groggy curse from inside. Your eyes burn from sleeplessness. Could you keep rousing a town while fighting your own fatigue? Knocker-ups were a peculiar necessity in medieval and later industrial towns, ensuring laborers, weavers, and smiths rose for early shifts before clocks were common. Historical records, like those from 15th century urban logs, describe them pacing streets at dawn, paid a pittance by workers who couldn't afford to oversleep. You tap another window, your stick's end frayed, and dodge a slop bucket dumped from above close call. The town's waking, but you've been up for hours, your legs aching from endless rounds. This isn't just waking people, it's a race against the sun, and you're losing. Here's a quirky tidbit: some knocker-ups use pea shooters to ping windows. Aiming for accuracy, imagine the complaints if they missed. You pat your pocket, wishing for a shooter instead of this splintery stick, and smirk bet it'd make you feel like a medieval sniper. Historians still argue whether knocker-ups were vital cogs in urban life, or just a quirky fix for a clockless world. You're leaning toward quirky as a dog barks. Spooked by your tapping? This street's a maze of sleep, and you're its weary alarm. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even bleaker. For now, you're rapping. The stick's rhythm, a dull beat against your own exhaustion. You recall that mudlark's filthy scramble? This is cleaner, but no less draining. Trading muck for monotony. A weaver's face appears, muttering thanks. But you're already moving. The next window waiting. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West Cowboy's dawn ride. At least you'd have a horse to carry you. You notice a woman crossing the street, her own stick tapping a baker's shutter. She's another knocker-up, her scarf tied against the dawn's chill. Women often took this job. Their voices are tapped softer but just as effective. Though the pay was as thin as the fog, you smirk kinda like being a medieval alarm clock, but with worse hours and no snooze button. The cobblestones are slick, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the cold, it's the endless walking, the sleep you never get, the fear of missing a window and costing someone their wage. Don't miss the next part, because it gets grimmer. You tap too hard, cracking a shutter, and brace for a shout. Luckily, none comes, but your heart's racing. Some knocker-ups were attacked by grumpy workers or lost jobs for oversleeping themselves, their lives tied to others' punctuality. You wonder if you keep pacing or collapse. Spoiler, probably collapse. You spot a faint glow from a smithy, workers already stirring. You recall that Roman knocker's early rounds. This is its twin, with icier streets and meaner dogs. The air's thick with fog and fatigue, and you're praying for sunrise. As you round a corner, you notice a broken stick discarded in the mud, another knocker-up's failure. Maybe you take a shaky breath, the cold biting your lungs. Medieval jobs like knocker-up weren't just work. They were treadmills, keeping you moving for scraps while the town slept. You glance at the woman, her taps steady despite the hour, and brace for what's next. This town's a clock that never stops, and you're its ticking heart, running on fumes. You've left the knocker-up's foggy streets behind, your weary legs now carrying you to the edge of a plague-ravaged village, circa 1350, where the air's thick with the stench of decay and burning herbs. Your boots sink into muddy paths, and you're a plague doctor now, clad in a wax cloak and a beaked mask stuffed with lavender, tasked with treating the dying in a world gripped by the Black Death. You approach a hovel, its door marked with a red cross, and hear a weak cough inside. Your gloved hands clutch a bag of useless remedies. Could you face the hopeless task of saving those already doomed? Plague doctors were a desperate response to the Black Death, which killed millions across Europe from 1347 to 1351. Historical records, like those from 14th century Italian cities, describe them wandering villages, diagnosing with urine samples and prescribing bloodletting or herbs, rarely curing anyone. You dug into the hovel, the mask's glass eyes fogging as you kneel by a feverish woman, her skin blotched with buboes. You dab her brow with a vinegar-soaked cloth, but her gasps tell you it's futile. The room's dark, reeking of sweat and despair, and you're a masked specter, more symbol than savior. Here's a quirky tidbit: some plague doctors carried smelling apples, fruit stuffed with cloves, to ward off miasma, about as useful as a scented candle in a storm. You adjust the mask, its beak chafing, and smirk bet it's the worst fashion statement ever. Historians still argue whether plague doctors were brave healers or just charlatans profiting from panic. You're leaning toward charlatans as you hear a child's wail from the next room. Another patient you can't save. This village is a graveyard, and you're its grim visitor. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even darker. For now, you're mixing a paste of crushed herbs, the woman's eyes pleading as you smear it on her sores. You recall that knocker-up's endless rounds. This is heavier, deadlier. With every breath, a gamble through your mask's filter. You offer her wine laced with poppy mercy, not medicine, and move to the door, dreading the next hovel. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West snakebite's quick risk. At least it wasn't a daily parade of death. You notice a woman outside, her apron stained, burning a pile of infected clothes. She's a healer or family, risking her life like you, though without the creepy mask. Women often nursed plague victims, their work unpaid but vital, their names lost to history. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval ICU shift, but with no ventilators. The woman's cough weakens, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the dying, it's the futility, the fear you're next, the mask that traps you in your own dread. Don't miss the next part, because it gets bleaker. You step outside, marking the door with chalk, another soul gone, or soon to be. Some plague doctors were attacked by desperate mobs, or died from the very disease they fought. Their masks no shield against fate. You wonder if you keep treating or flee. Spoiler, probably flee. You spot a cart rattling past, piled with bodies for the plague pit. You recall that Roman plague doctor's grim rounds. This is its masked air, with despair instead of chance. The air's thick with smoke and sorrow, and you're praying your mask holds. As you trudge to the next house, you notice a broken vial in the mud, someone's failed remedy, like yours. You take a shaky breath, the lavender's scent faint against the decay. Medieval jobs like plague doctor weren't just work, they were dances with death, offering hope where none existed. You glance at the burning pile, the woman's silhouette steady despite the chaos, and brace for what's next. This village is a pyre, and you're walking through its flames, hoping not to burn. You've left the plague doctor's doomed village behind, the stench of death and herbs still lingering as you shuffle into a dim, cavernous hall in a medieval town, circa 1350, where the air is thick with dust and the creak of wood. Your boots thud on a gritty floor, and you're a treadmill worker now, trudging endlessly on a giant wooden wheel to power a mill or crane, your legs burning with each step. The wheel groans under your weight, a relentless hamster cage that grinds grain or lifts stone. And you're dripping sweat. Could you keep walking this nowhere path for hours on end? Treadmill workers were a gritty reality in medieval Europe, driving human-powered wheels for construction or milling before water wheels became common. Historical records, like those from 13th century cathedral projects, show men, women, and even children toiled in these wheels, their steps fueling the medieval economy. You grip the wheel's worn rungs, each turn jarring your knees, the hall's shadows swallowing your effort. The overseer's whip cracks nearby, urging you faster, and you're panting, the dust choking your throat. This isn't just work, It's a slow, crushing marathon, and stopping means no pay or worse. Here's a quirky tidbit: some treadmills were called squirrel cages, a grim nod to the endless scampering, though squirrels didn't face whips. You spot a frayed rope dangling from the wheel and smirk bet it's dreaming of a nut stash. Not this grind. Historians still argue whether treadmill workers were skilled laborers or just replaceable muscle in a brutal system. You're leaning toward muscle as a rat skitters past, ignoring your misery. This hall's a prison of motion, and you're chained to its rhythm. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even harder. For now, you're stepping, the wheels creak a mocking metronome. Your calves screaming for rest. You recall that plague doctor's hopeless rounds. This is less deadly, but no less soul-crushing. Trading despair for exhaustion, the overseer barks, and you push harder. The grain sacks below barely piling up. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West Cowboys cattle drive? At least you'd see the sky. You notice a woman on a nearby wheel. Her face set, her steps steady, despite her patched dress. She's another worker, likely paid half your wage. Her strength outlasting younger men. Women often powered treadmills, especially in mills. Their labor cheap and expendable. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval gym membership. But with no protein shakes, the wheel's relentless, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the strain, it's the monotony, the hunger, the fear of slipping and breaking a leg with no one to care. Don't miss the next part, because it gets grimmer. You stumble, the wheel lurching, and catch yourself. Heart pounding falling means injury, and injury means starvation. Some workers collapsed, their bodies discarded like worn gears, replaced by the next desperate soul. You wonder if you keep walking or give up. Spoiler, probably keep walking. You're that broke. You spot a cracked rung, a silent threat to your next step. You recall that Roman treadmill's endless grind. This is its dusty twin, with whips instead of chains. The air's thick with grit and sweat, and you're praying for a break. As you push on, you notice a pile of grain dust in the corner fire hazard, but nobody cares. Least of all the overseer. You take a shaky breath, the dust coating your lungs. Medieval jobs like treadmill worker weren't just work. They were traps, wearing you down for a crust while the world moved on. You glance at the woman, her wheels still turning, and brace for what's next. This hall's a machine that eats effort, and you're its fuel, burning out with every step. You've stumbled out of the treadmill's grinding hall, your legs still throbbing as you weave through a medieval town's crowded streets, circa 1350, where the air smells of rotting scraps and the faint tang of burning tallow. Your boots slip on slick cobbles, and you're a bone picker now, scouring alleys for animal bones to sell to glue makers and soap boilers. Your sack clinks with femurs and ribs, each one a grim treasure, and you bend to snatch a sheep skull from a pile of refuse. Your back aches, and your hands are crusted with grime. Could you keep scavenging this filthy harvest under the town's judging eyes? Bone picking was a dirty, low-status job in medieval Europe, feeding industries that turned bones into glue, fertilizer, or even buttons. Historical records, like those from 14th century urban waste accounts, show bone pickers, often the poorest women and children, competed with dogs and rats for scraps in streets and slaughter yards. You sift through a heap, dodging a stray hound's snap, the skull's empty socket staring back. The town's alive with the hawkers and carts, but you're invisible, a ghost among the living. Your sack your only proof of worth. This isn't just scavenging, it's a fight for survival, one bone at a time. Here's a quirky tidbit: some bone pickers claim certain bones like cow shins brought luck if kept under a pillow. Though the smell wasn't lucky, you tuck the skull away and smirk. Bet it's cursing your mattress already. Historians still argue whether bone picking was a vital recycling role, or just a desperate scrabble for society's dregs. You're leaning toward desperate as a kid kicks mud at you, laughing like you're a stray dog. This street's a landfill, and you're its reluctant miner. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even grimmer. For now, you're digging, the refuse pile a stew of rot that sticks to your fingers. You recall that treadmill's endless steps. This is freer but filthier, trading sweat for stench. A butcher's cart rumbles past, spilling more bones, and you lunge, racing a rival picker, a gaunt woman with a sharper eye. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West Mudlark's riverbed hunt. At least the river washed the grime. You notice the woman, her sack heavier, her hands deft as she snags a rib before you can. Women dominated bone picking, their labor cheaper than men's, their lives spent in the muck for pennies. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval thrift store shift, but with worse inventory. The skull's your best find, but the sack's light, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the filth, it's the hunger, the competition, the shame of being seen as less than the bones you collect. Don't miss the next part, because it gets nastier. You grab a splintered femur, dodging a rat that's bolder than you, and wince as a shard pricks your palm. Cuts here mean fever, and there's no doctor for the likes of you. Some bone pickers starved or froze, their bodies left among the scraps they scavenged. You wonder if you keep picking or give up. Spoiler, probably keep picking. You're that broke. You spot a tavern's glow, its warmth mocking your chill. You recall that Roman bone scavenger's grim hall. This is its twin, with meaner dogs and colder nights. The air's thick with rot and scorn, and you're praying for a full sack. As you move to another pile, you notice a broken knife blade glinting someone's trash. Maybe your salvation if you can barter it. You take a shaky breath, the refuse's stench searing your lungs. Medieval jobs like bone picking weren't just work, they were humiliations. Stripping your dignity for a handful of bones, you glance at the woman, her sack slung over her shoulder, and brace for what's next. This street's a graveyard of scraps, and you're its weary reaper, scraping by on what the world discards. You've hauled your bone picker's grim sack away from the town's reeking streets, the weight of bones digging into your shoulder as you step into a muddy village square, circa 1350, where the air smells of damp straw and a faint whiff of questionable potions. Your boots sink into the mire, and you're a toad doctor now, peddling toad-based remedies to desperate villagers seeking cures for everything from warts to plague. You clutch a basket of wriggling toads, their slimy bodies slipping through your fingers, and set up a rickety stall, eyeing a skeptical crowd. Your stomach twists. Could you hawk these dubious cures while dodging accusations of witchcraft? Toad doctors were a peculiar fixture in medieval Europe, selling remedies rooted in folk medicine that often used toad skin, bones, or ashes for supposed healing powers. Historical records, like those from 15th century herbalist texts, describe these healers, often women mixing toad parts with herbs to treat ailments, though most cures were placebos at best. You hold up a squirming toad, its eyes bulging, and proclaim it a cure for fever. Your voice shaky as a villager with a limp approaches. The crowd murmurs, some curious, others clutching crosses, and you're starting to feel like a con artist in a witch hunt's crosshairs. Here's a quirky tidbit: some toad doctors wore toadskin amulets, claiming they channeled the creature's life force. More fashion disaster than magic. You pat a dried toad foot tied to your belt and smirk, bet it's scaring more than it's healing. Historians still argue whether toad doctors were genuine healers or just exploited folk beliefs for profit. You're leaning toward profit as a kid tosses a pebble at your stall, giggling like you're a carnival act. This square's a stage for desperation, and you're the shaky star. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even riskier. For now, you're grinding a toad's dried skin into powder. The basket croaks a grim chorus as you mix it with wilted mint. You recall that bone picker's filthy scavenging. This is cleaner but weirder, trading grime for suspicion. The limping villager hands you a copper coin, demanding a poultice, and you smear the paste on his hand, praying he doesn't notice it's mostly mud. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West snake oil hustle. At least those peddlers had better stories. You notice a woman nearby, her apron patched, selling her own toad brew. She's a rival, her glare sharp as she touts a plague-proof salve. Women dominated this trade, their knowledge of herbs and folklore making them trusted or feared by villages. You smirk, kind of like running a medieval Etsy shop, but with a side of heresy. The villager winces, claiming the poultice burns, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the toads, it's the distrust, the accusations, the fear you'll be blamed when the cure fails. Don't miss the next part, because it gets creepier. You hand out another toad paste, a woman with a cough snatching it eagerly, but a priest in the crowd eyes you, muttering about unnatural arts. Some toad doctors were tried as witches, their remedies twisted into proof of devilry, especially if patients died. You wonder if you'd keep peddling or bolt spoiler. Probably bolt. You spot a toad escaping, its hop mocking your hustle. You recall that Roman healer's dubious potions. This is its folk cousin, with toads instead of chance. The air's thick with straw and suspicion, and you're praying the crowd buys your pitch. As you scoop the runaway toad, you notice a cracked vial in your basket, last week's remedy, unsold and souring. You take a shaky breath, the straw's damp scent grounding you. Medieval jobs like toad doctor weren't just work, they were tightropes, balancing hope and heresy for a handful of coins. You glance at the rival, her stall busier, and brace for what's next. This square's a cauldron of belief and doubt, and you're stirring it, hoping not to boil over. You've packed up your toad doctor's stall, the villagers' suspicious glares fading as you descend into a dark, dripping sewer beneath the medieval town, circa 1350, where the air is a choking mix of mold and human waste. Your boots splash through ankle-deep filth, and you're a sewer hunter now, searching for lost valuables, coins, rings, anything in the town's rancid underbelly. Your torch sputters, casting shadows on slimy walls, and you clutch a hook stick to probe the muck. Your stomach lurches at the stench. Could you keep hunting in this putrid maze with disease lurking in every splash? Sewer hunting was a grim trade in medieval Europe, where the poorest braved urban sewers to recover items washed away or dumped, selling them for scraps. Historical records, like those from 14th century London's sanitation accounts, describe hunters risking drowning or illness for a chance at a lost brooch or penny. You rake the stick through the sludge, pulling up a tarnished spoon, its metal barely worth the effort. The sewer's a labyrinth, with low ceilings and sudden drops, and your torch's light is fading fast. This isn't just scavenging, it's a gamble against death, and you're rolling bad dice. Here's a quirky tidbit: some sewer hunters claimed they found sewer pearls, calcified lumps sold as charms more likely hardened waste than treasure. You spot a lumpy mass in the muck and smirk, bet it's not adorning anyone's neck. Historians still argue whether sewer hunting was a desperate hustle or a vital recycling role in filthy towns. You're leaning toward hustle as a rat swims past, its eyes glinting like it's mocking you. This sewer's a cesspool, and you're its reluctant diver. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even fouler. For now, you're probing, the muck sucking at your boots, each step a battle against the urge to retch. You recall that toad doctor's risky remedies. This is dirtier, deadlier, trading suspicion for slime. The spoon's your only find, and you need more to barter for bread. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West Mudlark's riverbed Scrabble. At least you'd see daylight. You notice a woman's shadow ahead, her own stick stirring the filth. She's another hunter, her cough echoing off the walls, a sign the sewer's already claiming her. Women often took this job, their small frames slipping through tight tunnels, though the pay was as rotten as the air. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval treasure hunt, but with zero glory. The torch flickers, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the stench, it's the darkness, the sickness, the fear of getting trapped in this stinking tomb. Don't miss the next part, because it gets nastier. You hook something heavy, a rusted buckle, maybe worth a meal, but it slips, splashing filth on your face, and you gag, spitting. Some hunters drowned in sudden floods, or caught fevers from the waste, their lives snuffed out for a handful of trinkets. You wonder if you keep hunting or climb out spoiler. Probably keep hunting. You're that desperate. You spot a crack in the wall, leaking more sludge. You recall that Roman sewer scavenger's grim toil. This is its twin, with tighter tunnels and worse rats. The air's thick with rot and panic, and you're praying for a real find. As you press on, you notice a glint, a bent ring, half buried, and you snatch it, heart racing despite the filth. You take a shaky breath, the mold's bite searing your lungs. Medieval jobs like sewer hunting weren't just work, they were descents into hell, trading your health for scraps the town forgot. You glance at the woman, her cough harsher now, and brace for what's next. This sewer's a greedy beast, and you're its starving prey, fishing for hope in a river of waste. You've clawed your way out of the sewer's rancid depths, the stench of waste still clinging as you emerge into a medieval town's dark, twisting streets, circa 1350, where the air is sharp with smoke and the faint tang of fear. Your boots slip on wet cobbles, and you're a link boy now, tasked with guiding nobles through perilous alleys with a flickering torch, its weak flame barely cutting the night. You lead a cloaked lord, his hand on his dagger. As shadows shift and footsteps echo behind you, your heart pounds. Could you keep your nerve in a maze where every corner hides a thief? Link boys were a vital, if risky, service in medieval Europe, lighting the way for wealthy travelers in cities with no streetlights and rampant crime. Historical records, like those from 14th century London's night watch logs, show boys or young men hired for pennies, often targeted by cutthroats or blamed for ambushes. You hold the torch high, its pitch dripping, and scan the alley, where a drunk's slurred song mixes with a dog's growl. The Lord's impatient, muttering about his manner, but you're focused on the shadows, one wrong turn, and you're both dead. This isn't just guiding, it's a tightrope walk through danger. Here's a quirky tidbit: some link boys carried stink pots, smoldering herbs to mask street smells useless against a dagger. Though, you sniff the torch's acrid smoke and smirk, but it's not winning any aromatherapy awards. Historians still argue whether link boys were cunning street rats or just desperate kids exploited by the rich. You're leaning toward exploited as a rat darts past, spooking the Lord, who curses you. This alley's a gauntlet, and you're the shaky shield. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even dicier. For now, you're leading, the torch's light bouncing off damp walls, each step a gamble against a hidden blade. You recall that sewer hunter's filthy quest. This is cleaner but twitchier, trading muck for menace. The Lord's cloak brushes your arm, his wealth a beacon for trouble. Bet you'd trade this for that Wild West Link Boys open trails. At least bandits there gave you room to run. You notice a woman's silhouette ahead, hawking pies from a cart. She's a night vendor, her eyes wary, likely used to dodging the same thugs you fear. Women sometimes worked as link girls, their torches guiding ladies or nuns, though the risks were no less deadly. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval Uber, but with no GPS or panic button. The alley narrows, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the dark, it's the silence, the unseen eyes, the fear you're leading your charge or yourself into a trap. Don't miss the next part, because it gets riskier. You turn a corner, the torch guttering as a figure looms just a beggar, but your pulse spikes, and the Lord grips his dagger tighter. Some link boys were robbed or killed, their torches snuffed by gangs who preyed on their roots. You wonder if you keep guiding or bolt. Spoiler, probably bolt. You spot a faint glow from a tavern, its safety a cruel tease. You recall that Roman night guide's grim walks. This is its twin, with meaner streets and worse odds. The air's thick with smoke and dread, and you're praying the Lord's manor is close. As you press on, you notice a broken lantern in the mud, another link boy's failure, maybe his last. You take a shaky breath, the pitch's bite grounding you. Medieval jobs like link boy weren't just work, they were gambles, betting your life on a flame and a noble's trust. You glance at the Lord, his face half hidden, and brace for what's next. This alley's a predator's lair, and you're the bait. Torch or no torch, you've escaped the link boy's treacherous alleys. The noble's impatient mutters fading as you crawl through a narrow, soot-blackened chimney in a medieval manor, circa 1350, where the air is a choking haze of ash and heat. Your bare knees scrape against rough brick, and you're a chimney sweep now, a child small enough to fit these deadly flues, scrubbing soot to keep the fires burning. Your lungs burn with every breath, and your hands, caked with grime, clutch a wire brush that's more foe than tool. You cough, The darkness pressing in. Could you keep climbing this suffocating trap without losing your nerve? Chimney sweeping was a brutal job in medieval Europe, often forced on orphaned or impoverished children whose tiny frames could navigate tide flues. Historical records, like those from 14th century urban regulations, describe sweeps facing burns, falls, or lung disease, their lives cheap in a world that prized warm hearths. You inch upward, the chimney's walls closing like a coffin, soot raining into your eyes. The manor's hearth roars below, its heat licking your feet, and you're trapped between fire and tight brick, a living brush in a noble's fireplace. This isn't just work. It's a slow, choking death sentence. Here's a quirky tidbit: some sweeps were given lucky soot to scatter at weddings. Believed to bring fertility, grimy, but profitable. You swipe a handful of soot and smirk. Bet it's the worst confetti ever. Historians still argue whether chimney sweeps were exploited victims or just a grim necessity of medieval life. You're leaning toward victims as you hear a distant shout, probably the master. Uncaring if you're stuck, this flue's a black hell, and you're its youngest prisoner. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how this job gets even deadlier. For now, you're scrubbing, the brush's bristles snagging on jagged mortar, each stroke filling your mouth with ash. You recall that Link Boy's risky torchlight. This is darker, tighter, with no escape but up or down. Your elbows bleed, scraped raw, and you wonder how you ended up here, sold by parents, or just stolen bet. You'd trade this for that Wild West snakebite's quick venom. At least it didn't bury you alive. You notice a faint clatter above another sweep. Maybe a girl, her cough echoing through the flue. Girls worked as sweeps too, their small bodies prized, though they faced the same burns and broken bones. You smirk, kinda like signing up for a medieval obstacle course, but with no finish line. The soot's in your hair, your ears, and you're starting to get why this job's nightmare fuel. It's not just the grime, it's the fear of getting stuck, the lungs that won't clear, the life you'll never outgrow. Don't miss the next part, because it gets grimmer. You push higher, a brick crumbling under your hand, and panic spikes. What if the flue collapses? Some sweeps suffocated or fell, their bodies pulled out like trash, replaced by the next kid. You wonder if you keep climbing or scream for help. Spoiler, probably scream, but who'd hear you spot a sliver of light above the chimney's end, tauntingly far. You recall that Roman chimney cleaner's grim toil. This is its child-sized twin, with tighter flues and the worse air. The air's thick with soot and terror, and you're praying for the top. As you scrape on, you notice a singed rag caught in a crevice. Another sweep's lost hope. Maybe you take a shaky breath, the ash coating your throat. Medieval jobs like chimney sweep weren't just work. They were thefts, stealing childhood for a noble's comfort. You think of the girl above, her cough a grim mirror, and brace for what's next. This chimney's a monster, and you're in its throat, fighting to breathe another day. You've crawled out of the chimney's sooty grip, your lungs still burning as you stand on a windswept hill overlooking the medieval town, circa 1350, where the air carries the faint scent of wood smoke and the distant clang of a smithy. Your hands are black with ash, your body aching from the gauntlet of gruesome jobs, and you're here to reflect on how these nightmare trades, gravedigger, sin eater, chimney sweep, shaped history, their echoes lingering in our world. You gaze at the town's jumble of thatch and stone, its people toiling below, and feel the weight of their struggles. Could you carry their lessons without breaking under them? These medieval jobs, born of necessity and desperation, were the backbone of a world that valued survival over comfort. Historical records, like those from 14th century guild charters, show they fueled economies: leather from tanners, cloth from fullers, even safety from rat catchers, while grinding workers into dust. You trace a finger over a weathered stone, its moss soft, and think of the gravedigger's endless pits, the plague doctor's futile mask, the bone picker's humble haul. Each job was a thread in the medieval tapestry, weaving progress with pain, their legacies in sanitation, medicine, and labor laws we take for granted. You're starting to feel like you've walked their paths, their grit now part of you. Here's a quirky tidbit: chimney sweeps' soot-stained faces inspired early theater makeup, turning their misery into stagecraft for medieval plays. You spot a faded carving on the stone, a jester's grin, and smirk bet it's mocking your soot-smudged hands. Historians still argue whether these jobs were mere exploitation or sparks for innovation, like better sewers or guilds. You're leaning toward both as you hear a cart rattle below, its driver a modern echo of the gong farmer's grim load. This hill's a vantage point, and you're seeing history's cost in every laborer's bent back. In 2 minutes, you'll be shocked by how these jobs still whisper today. For now, you're standing, the town's pulse faint but alive, its chimneys smoking, its alleys bustling. You recall that toad doctor's risky hustle. Her herbs echo in today's alternative medicine, just with better packaging. Jobs like executioner shaped early justice, their brutality pushing calls for fairness. You wonder if we've learned, or if we just dress the grind in new clothes. Bet you'd trade this view for that Wild West Canyon's raw lessons, but maybe not. These jobs taught resilience, but also humility, showing humanity's knack for enduring the worst. You notice a woman below, hauling a basket of wool, maybe a fuller's widow, carrying on despite the stench. Her strength mirrors the women who scavenge bones or brave sewers. Their names lost, but their work foundational. You smirk kinda like us, building on their scars without knowing it. The town's jobs weren't just tasks, they were mirrors, reflecting a world that needed every hand, no matter how dirty. You're starting to get why they matter. They weren't pretty, but they were human, forging order from chaos, one filthy step at a time. Don't miss the next part, because it weaves it all together. You shift, the hill's breeze cooling your face, and spot a star blinking in the dusk. From leech bites to whipping scars, these jobs taught survival, but also compassion. Modern labor owes them that. You wonder if we honor their cost, or just forget. You recall that plague doctor's hopeless fight. Today's doctors carry her mask's shadow. The air's thick with smoke and reflection, and you're carrying their weight, lighter now, but real. As the town fades into twilight, you take a final look, its roofs, its struggles, its stubborn life. You notice a hawk soaring, tying past to present, its flight free where workers were bound. These medieval jobs didn't just shape history, they shaped us, daring us to value every laborer's sweat. You breathe deep, the wood smoke soft, and let the town's hum settle. Their stories are yours now, to carry or leave, but they've marked you, like soot that never quite washes off. You wind it down. You're back in your own quiet space now. The medieval town's smoke and toil fading like a dream carried off by the breeze. The hill, the alleys, the weight of all those grueling jobs they're slipping away, soft as a whisper, leaving only a gentle hum in your mind. You sink into your bed, the world slowing, each breath a step deeper into calm. Those shovels, those flues, those desperate hands belong to a far-off time. Not here, not now. You're safe, wrapped in the present, where the only sound is a fan's soft spin or a distant night's hush. Let the past burdens drift graves, sewers, soot-choked lungs, let them dissolve into starlight. Weightless and far, you've walked their paths, felt their lessons, but they can't touch you here. Your eyes flutter, the air cool, kind. Picture a quiet hill, its grass swaying, its stars watching over you, timeless and gentle. You're not digging, not climbing, just resting, easing into sleep's warm embrace. The world blurs, soft, safe, and you drift further, further, until there's only peace. Sleep well, toiler. The past tales will wait, but for now, there's just this moment, this quiet, this calm, sweet dreams.